When I first moved into Oak Haven Estates, I was looking for one thing: peace. After years of active service with the Army, half of which I spent deployed overseas in high-risk zones, and the other half stateside training military working dogs, I was more than ready to leave that life behind, or at least settle into a version of it that didn't include 3 a.m. alarms, convoy briefings, and dust storms. My retirement papers were finalized, my gear was packed, and there was only one companion I knew I was bringing with me: Ranger, my canine partner and best friend for the last 4 years. Ranger wasn't just a dog. He was a fellow soldier, trained in explosive detection, apprehension, patrol, and handler protection. He had saved my life more times than I could count. And when he was honorably retired from active service, I fought tooth and nail to adopt him. Oak Haven was meant to be our haven. A little suburban paradise on the edge of town where lawns were always mowed, mailboxes stood in perfect symmetry, and HOA rules were printed in leather-bound booklets like sacred texts. It was too perfect, and like most too perfect places, there was a Karen. Her name was Karen Straude, and her reputation had reached me before I even closed on the house. A neighbor I met during the final walkthrough leaned over and whispered, "Watch out for the HOA president. She'll fine you for breathing wrong." I laughed then. I'm not laughing now. Karen was the kind of woman who treated her HOA position like a badge and a gavel all rolled into one. Tall, always wearing visor caps and stiff polos with the HOA logo embroidered like a corporate uniform, she patrolled the neighborhood with the energy of a mall cop 2 weeks from retirement, but far more malicious. I tried to stay off her radar, kept my yard clean, didn't blast music, even asked if she had any landscaping recommendations to match the neighborhood aesthetic. But none of it mattered. The moment she saw Ranger, everything changed. He's a large dog, part Belgian Malinois, part German Shepherd, with a sleek black coat and piercing eyes that carry the kind of intelligence you don't usually see in animals. Most people admire him. Children love him. Veterans nod when they pass us on the street. But Karen? Karen saw a threat. The first time she approached us, she was walking a tiny yappy dog named Bentley wearing pink booties and a matching harness that looked more designer than functional. Ranger and I were finishing a morning run, both of us panting, when she stepped into our path and said, "That beast should be muzzled." Blinking, caught off guard, I replied, "Excuse me? He's leashed, calm, and fully trained." She folded her arms and sniffed. "It's not about the leash. It's about safety. This is a family community." I didn't rise to the bait, just nodded and moved along. But the next day, I found a warning slip on my door. Violation of Section 3B of the HOA Pet Policy, dangerous animal presence. No citation, no proof, just a word. I appealed. It got denied. I submitted documentation showing Ranger's military background, full behavioral certification, and even a statement from my vet. It didn't matter. Karen had made up her mind. Over the next few weeks, I found myself tiptoeing around my own neighborhood. Ranger, who used to walk tall and proud, started sensing my unease. He's smart like that, sensitive, still sharp. We trained daily in the backyard, ran drills like old times, but I began noticing eyes on us. Karen began checking in during our training, standing just beyond the property line with a clipboard and phone in hand. One time, she actually recorded me while we were doing a bite sleeve session with a visiting buddy from my old unit. Another time, she tried to claim my attack drills violated HOA noise ordinances. When I explained he was a retired military working dog, not a house pet, she scoffed. "So he's trained to attack?" she asked. "And you think that makes him safer?" The ignorance was infuriating. The bias, even more so. Still, I held back. Ranger had been through worse. So had I. But things kept escalating. Karen began slipping notes into my mailbox. Unsigned but clearly her tone. "Your animal is a threat to our children. No one feels safe walking past your yard. You should relocate to a rural area where dogs like that belong. I ignored most of them, until she called animal control on us. Twice. Each time they showed up, they left apologizing. One officer even shook my hand and thanked Ranger for his service. But Karen? She wasn't deterred. If anything, it made her angrier. And when she couldn't find legal ways to get rid of us, I knew she'd eventually do something stupid. I just never expected her to hurt my dog. The attack that changed everything. The weeks following our rocky introduction with Karen could best be described as a game of escalating passive aggression. Except I wasn't playing, and she wasn't passive. What started as complaints and citations quickly turned into a full-blown personal vendetta against me, and, more specifically, Ranger. Every time we stepped outside, Karen's judgmental gaze was there. Whether from across the street, her front porch, or through half-drawn blinds. She didn't even try to be subtle about it. I could practically feel her eyes boring holes into the back of my skull during every training session or walk. At first, I tried to shrug it off. I've been stared at before, judged before, hated before. That's part of wearing a uniform. But what Karen was doing wasn't just a grudge. It was a crusade. She made Ranger her personal obsession, and she was determined to frame him as a menace, no matter what it took. It started with more bogus fines, barking violations, leash infractions, menacing presence reports. The irony? Ranger rarely even barked. He was military trained, cool under pressure, and quiet unless he was commanded to alert. But Karen didn't care. She began canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors to warn families about the dangerous animal living on Hemlock Drive. I caught wind of her little campaign after a neighbor politely pulled me aside and said, "Hey man, just so you know, she's telling people your dog's been trained to attack kids." I nearly lost it. But instead of reacting emotionally, I gathered my paperwork, the behavioral certifications, the military retirement documents, even his vet's letterhead, and made laminated copies to hand out. It became a bizarre little PR operation, defending my dog's name like he was running for office. Then came the photos. Karen began taking pictures of us mid-walk, often when Ranger was yawning or mid-stride, so it looked like he was baring his teeth or lunging. Of course he wasn't, but with the right lighting and a biased narrator, it was easy to spin. One particularly manipulative image she circulated on the HOA's email newsletter, which she conveniently managed, showed Ranger mid-jump during a ball fetch session, his teeth visible and body extended. The caption read, "Is this what you want near your children?" My phone lit up that night with concerned neighbors asking questions, some supportive, some suspicious. It was exhausting. I didn't sign up for this. Neither did Ranger. The final straw before the incident came during a Saturday morning jog. Ranger and I were mid-loop, rounding a corner, when we nearly collided with Karen, who had just stepped out of a hedge like she was trying to catch us doing something illegal. She screamed, dropped her purse, and pointed at Ranger like he was a wild animal. "He tried to bite me," she shrieked, even though we barely passed her. I was stunned, but Ranger just looked up at me like, "Again?" Two witnesses, neighbors walking their toddlers, immediately jumped to our defense, explaining that Karen had stepped into our path and startled herself. Still, she whipped out her phone and called the HOA hotline, then animal control. For the third time, the animal control officer showed up, this time with a bit more patience worn thin. His name was Sam, and I'd spoken with him before. "Look," he said, not unkindly, "we've had 3 calls, and we have to follow protocol. But off the record, we know what this is." He took one look at Ranger, calm, seated, alert inside, and sighed. "You know she's pushing for a behavioral review, right?" I nodded. "Let her. I'll bring the documentation and a demonstration. He'll pass with flying colors." Sam nodded back. "I believe you. But she's not going to stop. The day everything changed, I went to the HOA board directly next, which was its own disaster. They were mostly Karen's cronies, residents who didn't want drama and were too intimidated to challenge her authority. "We're aware of the situation," one board member mumbled. "We just ask that both parties exercise neighborly discretion." Neighborly discretion. One of them actually suggested I put Ranger in a muzzle during walks, just to make everyone feel safer. I laughed in disbelief. "You want me to muzzle a dog with a higher clearance and a better service record than any of you?" I got up and walked out before I could say something I'd regret. It was after that meeting that things turned hostile. My security system started picking up odd activity near the property line. Someone walking by at 2 a.m., shining a flashlight into my yard. Another time, I found pieces of sausage meat scattered near the back gate. I had it tested. It contained trace amounts of rat poison. I didn't have proof it was Karen, but I filed a police report anyway. That's when I installed a few hidden cameras of my own, military-grade, motion-triggered, and built into garden fixtures. If she made another move, I'd catch her. Then came the week of the incident. Ranger and I had just wrapped up a 3-mile jog. He was off-leash but under command, legal on my private property, fully fenced in. As I reached for the garden hose, I heard it, the unmistakable click and high-pitched hum of a stun gun powering up. Before I could react, a bolt of current cracked through the air, followed by Ranger's yelp. He collapsed mid-step, muscles locking, eyes wild. I dropped the hose and ran to him, kneeling, hands on his chest, heart pounding. And then I saw her, Karen, standing on the other side of the fence with a pink, rhinestone-studded taser in her hand. "I warned you," she screamed. "That animal doesn't belong here." My vision went red, and in that moment, she had no idea what she had just done, because she hadn't just attacked my dog. She had assaulted a retired military working dog, which meant she didn't just cross a line. She broke federal law, and I was going to make damn sure she paid for it. The aftermath. Justice served. I've experienced adrenaline before. Ambushes in combat zones, near-miss airstrikes, armed convoys gone wrong. But nothing prepared me for the primal, blood-freezing kind of rage that hit me when I saw Ranger crumple to the ground mid-step, his body convulsing from the electric shock. It took me a second to react, because my brain simply couldn't register what had happened. One moment, we were cooling down from a peaceful jog. The next, Karen stood across the property line like some suburban executioner, holding a pink, bedazzled taser with a smug expression on her face, like she had just eliminated a threat instead of assaulting a hero. My first instinct was to charge her, but years of training kicked in. I dropped to my knees beside Ranger, my hands already scanning his body, checking his vitals. He was breathing but labored. His eyes were wide and confused, as if he couldn't believe what just happened. I muttered his name repeatedly, my voice breaking between, "It's okay," and "I got you." "Get away from him," Karen shrieked, backing up. "That dog is unstable." She actually had the audacity to look proud of herself, as if she had performed some noble civic duty instead of committing a criminal act. I didn't answer. I was too busy scooping Ranger into my arms like I'd done before. Only this time, it wasn't in combat, and it wasn't a war zone. Yet it felt just as urgent. I rushed him inside, laid him on the living room rug, and immediately dialed my emergency vet. While I waited for the vet to arrive, I yanked open my home surveillance app, heart pounding, knowing my hidden yard cameras had captured every damn second. And there it was, clear footage of Karen raising her taser, aiming and firing through the fence. Ranger wasn't barking, wasn't lunging. He was just walking calmly, tail loose, tongue out from the jog. I zoomed in on Karen's face in the footage. There was no fear, no panic, just entitlement. She wasn't defending herself. She was executing a personal vendetta. When the vet team arrived, they stabilized Ranger quickly, confirming what I feared. He had suffered a non-lethal shock, but due to his age and past exposure to blast trauma, the electrical current could have caused serious neurological damage. I filed a police report that same afternoon. The responding officer, a local deputy named Torres, stood silently while I played the footage on a loop. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "She just tossed your dog like she was taking out the trash." I nodded. He's a retired military working dog. This isn't just animal cruelty. It's a federal offense under the Military Dog Protection Act. His eyes widened. "She's got no idea what she just did." I provided Rangers official military discharge paperwork, service record, and even a letter from my commanding officer confirming his status as a military veteran and service dog. Torres took everything. "We're escalating this to the county," he said. "This isn't something we sweep under the rug." The fallout. Karen's downfall. The next morning, the HOA inbox exploded. Karen had the audacity to send out an incident summary to the neighborhood, claiming she had been forced to neutralize a threat on her daily walk, and that she was traumatized by the experience. What she didn't anticipate was that her message was immediately forwarded to me, along with dozens of replies from residents demanding to know why she was carrying a weapon around a peaceful neighborhood in the first place. That same day, I forwarded the footage to the local news tip line. And just like that, the story blew up. HOA President Taser's military dog in suburban showdown hit the local headlines, followed by a video still of Ranger mid-shock, his body mid-collapse. The veteran community came out in force. Former handlers, service members, 9 units, even Gold Star families. My inbox was flooded with support. The Veterans Association issued a formal statement condemning the act. A GoFundMe set up by a stranger to cover Rangers' medical bills and Justice Fund raised over $15,000 in 24 hours. Karen? She vanished, didn't answer the door, didn't show up for her morning patrols, and her HOA badge was conspicuously missing from her porch. But justice wasn't done. Not yet. Within a week, I received a call from an investigator with the Department of Defense Military Working Dog Program, informing me that they had reviewed the footage and were initiating a formal complaint to be filed under the Federal Animal Welfare Act, which now included protection clauses for retired military animals. Karen was going to be federally charged with assaulting a military working dog, a charge that carried real weight, both legally and publicly. But what sealed her fate wasn't the footage, or the headlines, or even the outcry. It was Ranger. After a week of rest, he was back on his paws, slower but alert. We attended the follow-up veterinary checkup, and were told he was lucky. Not permanently damaged, but still vulnerable. That night, as I sat with him on the porch, sipping tea and scratching his ears, I told him what I planned to do next. "We're taking this all the way," I said. "Not just for you, for every other dog like you, for every soldier, every handler, every partner." Ranger just leaned into me like he always had, letting out a low huff. That was all I needed. The following day, I filed a civil suit in tandem with a federal complaint. It wasn't about money. It was about principle. Karen needed to face consequences. Not just for harming my dog, but for thinking her HOA badge made her immune to them. And based on the subpoenas starting to roll in, the look on her face when they finally serve her was going to be worth every ounce of restraint I had shown so far. When the process server knocked on Karen's door 2 weeks after the incident, the neighborhood seemed to hold its collective breath. Curtains twitched. Screenshots flew across group chats. No one saw her answer. But by nightfall, the documents were in her hands, and her porch light, which once burned like a lighthouse of petty authoritarianism, went dark for good. The civil suit had been officially filed under my name, backed by a litany of evidence: high-definition footage, medical reports from Ranger's vet, military discharge documentation, and an official statement from the Department of Defense's Military Working Dog Program. But it wasn't just me going after her anymore. Ranger had become a symbol, an icon for veterans, handlers, and animal rights advocates alike. What Karen thought would be a power move had become a national disgrace, and the full force of legal and public outrage was coming down like a thunderstorm. Within days of the story hitting national coverage, Karen's face was everywhere, plastered across headlines, late-night segments, and online forums. HOA President Taser's retired military dog, Suburban Nightmare, Patriot Pooch attacked, and my personal favorite, Karen goes too far. Public pressure escalated. A Change.org petition demanding her removal from any position of community authority hit 250,000 signatures in less than a week. When she finally stepped outside again, clad in oversized sunglasses and a hoodie as if she could vanish into suburbia, neighbors didn't speak to her. Some turned their backs, others watched coldly. But the legal repercussions were just as sharp. First came the civil case. Aggravated animal cruelty, emotional distress, and damages related to veterinary costs and trauma. My lawyer, a military spouse with a reputation for never losing veteran cases, was meticulous. Every citation Karen had filed against me became part of the narrative, evidence of targeted harassment. Each letter she'd slipped into my mailbox was presented as premeditation. The fact that she fired a taser through a fence at a leash dog, that sealed the intent. The judge scheduled an evidentiary hearing, and the court date was set. But even before we stepped inside the courthouse, Karen's world was crumbling. The HOA convened an emergency board meeting, this time without her. They had no choice but to vote on her removal. Unanimously, she was stripped of her presidency, barred from holding any future HOA position, and fined for conduct unbecoming of an officer under their own charter. That same night, the HOA issued a public apology to the neighborhood on embossed letterhead, which included a formal statement of support for me and Ranger. For once, the board had grown a spine. A week later, Karen's mailbox was found flattened, run over in the middle of the night. Someone planted a small American flag in the dirt where it used to stand. I didn't do it. I didn't condone it. But I understood it. Still, I wasn't after revenge. I was after accountability. During the court hearing, Karen's lawyer tried everything. Claimed it was self-defense. Insisted she feared for her life. Tried to discredit Ranger's service status by claiming he was just a pet. My lawyer responded by playing a clip of Ranger performing a precision command routine, followed by a signed commendation from my former commanding officer outlining Ranger's involvement in 3 separate bomb sweeps that saved a total of 27 lives. The judge sat in silence for a moment before leaning forward and asking one question. So, Miss Straude, why exactly were you carrying a taser in the first place? Karen had no answer. The court ruled in our favor. Karen was ordered to pay damages for Ranger's medical bills, a fine for unlawful weapon discharge, court costs. She also faced a misdemeanor charge for animal cruelty and a federal warning on her record. An enormous deal for someone who had previously taken pride in managing other people's behavior. But what really buried her was the community's rejection. She was removed from every neighborhood committee. Parents warned their kids not to go near her house. A Support Our Service Dogs block party was organized across the street the same weekend as her penalty hearing. Ranger was the guest of honor. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't throw her words back at her. I just showed up, stood beside Ranger in his custom red, white, and blue collar, and accepted every handshake, every thank you, every hug from people who admitted they had once been afraid of him because of her. One woman, with tears in her eyes, brought her son over to meet Ranger. I used to be scared, the boy said, but my mom said he's a hero. Ranger leaned down and gently licked his hand. That moment, that was justice. Karen eventually sold her house. Quietly. The listing was anonymous, the move unannounced. One morning, her car was gone, and her porch was empty. A new family moved in. Nice folks, no HOA aspirations. The only sign she'd ever lived there was the faint square in the grass where her president of the HOA sign used to be staked. As for Ranger, he made a full recovery. His coat gleams again, his energy's back, and his tail wags like it always did before the stun. But he walks a little closer to me now, a little more protective. And me? I keep my head up when we walk. I don't glance nervously at fences or windows, because Karen's gone. And more importantly, people know now. They know who Ranger is, what he represents, and what happens when you mess with loyalty forged in combat. Our home feels like a haven again. Finally. And I swear, every now and then, when we pass by the flag someone left where Karen's mailbox used to be, Ranger gives it a little extra tail wag. Like he knows, like he remembers. Because loyalty never forgets.